Oh, I'm on the wrong camera. Ha ha! What's happening, everybody?
Hey,
We are
Charlie.
back in the saddle again. Ernesto, we got Matt live.
Yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in. I'm going to open with an announcement. Um, we had expected to feature a really wonderful artist called Raine Stern on uh, her original music and voice and acoustic guitar and electric guitar too. And I'm sad to say that she has caught a bug or food poisoning or something, and unfortunately has had to cancel. So we wish her a speedy recovery. In the meantime, we didn't want to let this opportunity go to waste because we had a specific microphone technique that we had hoped to demonstrate. And by the way, I'm hoping my audio is going out. If any of you could confirm that in the chat, that would be great. We had hoped to demonstrate this technique, and then we realized we still could. So the MVP award for the day goes to Charlie and Ernesto for cooking up an alternative demo that lets us show off this new or this microphone technique that is really great for singer-songwriters, meaning people who are trying to record voice and guitar at the same time. And we'll talk more about that as we go through. Thanks for the confirmation there. Cool. Yeah. So Charlie and Ernesto, again, thank you for stepping up. This should be a good one.
Oh, no problem. Everybody's going to get to hear Ernesto's new hit song.
Oh man. It'll be guaranteed top 50.
His mom will love it. But yeah, this is actually, I'm glad we went ahead and did this because this initial technique that we're going to show is actually really, really cool and really effective. And also with the Delphos 2, with the multipolar patterns, we're going to get to hear which pattern you have selected not only affects the area that it's picking up in front or behind the mic, but also the slight tonal change, right?
Yes.
Between the three polar patterns. And I think I found something new today that I didn't know that I'm going to start doing going forward. And I'll mention that later, but
So let's describe what the issue is. So if you're someone who's recording guitar and vocals at the same time, there's a lot of ways you could do it. You could put one microphone on both, and in fact, we've done that before. But a more common way is to put one mic on the voice and one mic on the guitar. But the problem with that is, Charlie, as the resident audio expert,
bleed and phase issues.
exactly.
And sometimes you got two mics in a close proximity to two instruments, the vocal and the acoustic or guitar or whatever, making noise. So there's no way to get around bleed, but it's the type of bleed or how the bleed from one instrument gets into a mic that you don't want it to be in too much and how that affects your sound and what you can do with it later. And we are going to start off by trying to deal with that by using the Figure-8 polar pattern. So today, Figure-8 gets to flex its muscle. It shows you why it's cool.
Yeah.
And not in a typical Blumlein type setup either.
But let's talk for a second about bleed. So what that means in this particular context is that the guitar can be heard by the vocal mic and the voice can be heard by the guitar mic. And there's a couple of things that could go sideways with that. And one is, depending on the relative position of the mics and the voice and the guitar, you could have comb filtering, which is where the time of arrival of, say, the voice hits the two mics in a different amount of time, such that when you combine them, some frequencies cancel. So some might get exaggerated and some other ones might cancel, and it can lead to a weird, fuzzy hollow. I mean, it could be all kinds of different effects, none of which are good. So that's what Charlie said, sort of shorthand when he said like phase issues. Comb filtering would be one example of a phase issue.
Because it could be, and you could also get a little bit of a slapback, even though they're pretty close. When you pull the two mics up, they're just off just a little bit. So yeah, you get that phase, that bit of comb filtering. And while that could be cool on one of the instruments is something, when you have two mics in close proximity to each other, capturing two instruments, there's nothing you can do about that. You can time align a little bit, but then you run into a possibility of a whole other headache. So if you can use the polar pattern of the microphone to your advantage, the null point. In this case, we're really going to take advantage of the null point or the sides of the Figure-8 pattern to mitigate when he's singing into the acoustic mic and from the acoustic getting into the vocal mic. You don't get rid of all of it, but it's amazing how well it can work and get it down low enough to where it's not an issue, to where you still have the ability to change the volume. Like if you turn the acoustic up or down, that microphone, you're not losing your voice also. We're going to do this with the Cardioid and the Omni as well, and we can kind of demonstrate this a little bit more, especially in Cardioid, how the two mics become much more connected. So a change in one really affects the other. Whereas in the Figure-8, we'd still have a little bit of room to do some processing to the vocal or processing to the acoustic guitar and not have it adversely affect the other sound source. So we could brighten up the vocals without necessarily brightening up too much of the acoustic guitar or vice versa, or put other effects on it or something like that.
Yeah, that's exactly the segue to what I wanted to say next, which is when you're doing EQ and compression, you'd probably want to treat those sources differently. And so the more isolation you can get, the better.
Yeah, especially if you are trying to use two mics to maximize each source. You know, if you're obviously, I think when we get to the Omni, especially, you'll hear that one mic could do the trick, you know, there. But when we're trying to get the most out of the two sounds and have a little bit of leeway after the fact to, you know, process if you wanted to.
Yeah. So I also wanted to talk just very, very briefly for those who haven't tried it before about what Figure-8 is. And this is a little nerdier and not something anyone needs to know. But for those who do want to know, this is what it is. And for those who don't, except for those who are watching in real time, you can just fast forward 30 seconds. But the way a large diaphragm microphone makes different polar patterns is there's a front-facing capsule and a rear-facing capsule. And in Cardioid, you're just hearing the front. This is a little simplified. In Omni, you're hearing front and back put together. And in Figure-8, you're hearing front and back put together, except that the polarity on the rear is reversed. And what that means practically, and the reason that it creates this thing that Charlie mentioned called a null, is that you're subtracting the rear from the front. And so on the sides, you've got the same signal front and back, but one of them is negative. And so when they combine, they basically cancel. And so that means from the sides of a Figure-8 microphone, you have very little pickup. And it's not none, but it's a lot less. So you might get 15, 18 decibels of attenuation from the side. And so what the whole point of this technique is to use two Figure-8s. And so you take the vocal mic and you point the mic at the mouth, and then you point the null of it, the side, at the guitar, and then vice versa for the guitar mic. So the guitar mic's pointing at the guitar and the null of it's pointing at the singer's mouth. And that's the way to sort of maximize the isolation in each track. So.
And someone on my channel also brought up using, you know, a time alignment, you know, like the one from Little Labs, or I have a radial phaser. And that is always a possibility if you want to align things. However, if you maximize your mic placements, you can get a more realistic depth with them not time aligned, but aligned well in front of the source, that you won't necessarily get if things have been time aligned later or using you know, a plug-in or a piece of hardware. And I relate that same thing to drums. You know, it's why I don't line overheads or rooms up. It's like all of those things, if they're placed well and they are in phase as much as they possibly can be together, whether it's two mics on an acoustic or a bunch of mics on a drums, create a depth that doesn't happen when everything is perfectly aligned. Not saying right or wrong, all of that stuff, it all depends on your personal preferences. But what we're going to do today is not time align them. We just got the two mics in front, and we're going to go for a sound that way.
Right on.
So
let's do it.
Should we do this thing?
Are those mics still in Figure-8? Did we set them back?
Yes, we put them back. Yeah.
All right.
So I'm going to go to headphones now so I can hear better. And I am on switch duty and audio duty. So I'm going to hopefully not mess up our switch too much. Let's go to camera 5. So it's a little tough to see in the camera angle. We tried to get an angle that really showed this, but it's just a little tricky. But so you know, the top mic is angled. Ernesto's nose, yeah. Here, Ernesto, let me go to the side view. Hold on one second. Let me go to 6.
And do you want to go to 1 up, just your camera, not mine?
Oh yeah, sorry. Let me get in there. Boom.
Right on.
I have 2 sources I have to change. All right, so hey Ernesto, can you point at where you've got the logo looking at you? So it's literally faced up, almost basically at his nose.
Yeah.
So the knoll is
Should be
facing the acoustic.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
down here.
Or really close to it anyway. And can you do the same thing with the mic that's on the acoustic?
And then this guy, right? The logo is here, so it's pointing right at the 12th fret, and then what would be the null? It's pointing at my nose.
Now you could move these mics closer and exaggerate that more. You could move them back and get more of an open sound in the room. You know, that's totally up to you. We felt like this was a pretty good sound and a good way to demonstrate this, and it sounds pretty good. So let's do one at a time. Just play a little acoustic, and I'm gonna solo just the acoustic. Here's the vocal mic. Hold on, don't sing yet.
Hey.
Got Celine Dion in the house today.
You know,
Here, just play the acoustic. I just want to hear them to hear the difference of just that mic, the bleed. So do that same thing again.
that was a great intro.
I know, I wrecked it. So again, this is the vocal mic we're listening to. Here's the mic on the acoustic. Vocal mic. Acoustic. All right, you want to give me just a little taste of singing, and I'm gonna same thing right now. I have only the mic that's pointing at the acoustic is on.
Yeah.
So give me some of that hit song you've been working on.
Oh yeah. All right.
Here's the vocal mic.
In studio, Ultimate Ink. Here I am.
Vocal mic.
Here I am, having so
Together.
much fun. Here I am, yeah, so much fun. Here I am, so much fun. Here I am, yay! That's my range, man.
Nice.
Can't go higher than that.
You know what, everybody? Come on, we gotta give him a hand. Short notice, coming in singing. But you can hear, Matt. You still there? Do I still have you? I think so. I've got too many mice here to mess with. So you can really hear how well those mics. We're kind of in a quasi ORTF, quasi XY. They're not obviously over the top of each other like a Blumlein, but they're not far enough apart to be technically an ORTF. But with just getting those mics angled, you can really hear how well the null mitigates whatever sound source is in that null point, which is the side of the microphone. So here, do that again. And I'm going to turn the vocal mic all the way down, and I'm just going to start. Wait, let me make sure I'm doing the right one. And I'm just going to blend the vocal mic in just to show you kind of the range of control you can have between the two sound sources with this setup.
Okay.
So go for it again there, brother.
Yeah.
Acoustic mic only.
Having so much fun. Here I am, having so much fun.
Turn the acoustic
So
down.
much fun. So much fun. So much fun. Yeah, yeah. So much fun. So much fun.
can't tell if it's sarcasm or if he's actually having fun.
Well, you know, I have to keep the lyrics neutral. So.
Yes. So here, I'm going to go back to that front shot so you can kind of see where we're at on that's camera 5. There we go. So we've got the mic on the acoustics around, what do we end up with, Ernesto? 12th, 13th fret?
Yeah. So basically it's pointing around 12, 14, you know, if I'm not moving too much. So I'm trying not to. So yeah, that's pretty much what it is. Yeah.
And we tried a couple different spots, but that felt like a good blend between both of those. So that last demo we was doing, I had the vocal mic just all the way turned down and I just started fading that in. So you have a lot of control with these two mics on the source light when you set them up like this in Figure-8, which makes it real easy to kind of go to town with later if you do want to do some compression or some, you know, other processing, you know, however you see fit. And it sounds really good. So we got Matt. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah. Have you got my audio too?
Yeah.
I think it's
sorry. I still have to look back at you with the other computer.
No worries. I think it's also worth noting, as you saw in the side shot, that the vocal mic is a good, 12, 14 inches away, right? So in other words, we didn't have to shove the mic right up in Ernesto's face to get the isolation. You can still have a little bit of distance and make it more natural so the singer, you know, feels like he can move around a little bit. And
yeah, exactly. And that's one thing I did mention briefly just at the top. You could move them closer. I mean, the Delphos will easily handle anything you throw at it from an acoustic volume-wise. So you could exaggerate it quite a bit by moving the mics forward. But having them back that far does make it feel a little bit more natural for the vocalist. You know, because you can move. Even though the Figure-8, it's a fairly tight pattern. You know, it's not, you know, it's not as generous as a cardioid pattern, right, Matt?
No, not at all. It's much narrower front and back than cardioid.
Right. So too much movement, and you'll hear volume drops. If your singer starts to try to do some stage diving while they're doing this, probably not going to work very well. But if you stay kind of relatively close in front of the microphone, a little bit of movement that feels natural to the player won't get outside of what the mic is seeing, and it should be really consistent. The other added benefit of Figure-8 is you're getting the backside, so you get a little bit of room automatically in your sound, which can help quite a bit, especially if you have a nice sounding space. It can feel really natural without adding any of the reverb or anything. Should we check out what the other polar patterns with and do a little demonstration of how the sound changes?
You want to mute
Ernesto, I'm going to mute you.
Yep.
You're good.
So just to get nerdy for a second, in cardioid, the attenuation at 90 degrees is about 6 dB, which means a sound source that's exactly to the side of the microphone is about 6 decibels quieter than if it's directly in front, and so 6 dB is not a lot. 9 or 10 dB is kind of understood to be twice as loud or half as loud, depending which way you're going. So 6 dB is not a ton of attenuation, whereas in Figure-8, the 90-degree attenuation could be 15, 18 decibels, something like that. So it's quite.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And it also, you hear it more with the Figure-8 when you're playing, when both instruments are happening, like the acoustic and the vocal, and they're singing at their volume, it exaggerates that even more. Because when the acoustic is really going and it's getting good volume going into that mic, that 15 dB or 18, whatever it is even more effective. If you're playing a little bit softer, you'll get a little bit, or you have the chance of getting a little bit more bleed in there. But man, I'm impressed so far. Okay, so we're in cardioid, both mics, right, Ernesto?
Yes.
So Matt, there's one thing that happens. Can you explain what you told me while we were doing sound check? Because I didn't actually know this either. And explain why we actually have a bit more volume now.
Yeah. So totally lost my train of thought. So. So what Charlie's getting at is that on this microphone, this is not always true, but in this microphone, cardioid is 4 or 5 decibels louder than either Omni or Figure-8. And it was interesting the way Charlie posed the question, which is a totally natural way to do it. Like, why is Figure-8 quieter? Like, what happened to my output level? And the answer is that the technical explanation is kind of the other way around, that cardioid mode on this microphone has 4 or 5 dB higher output than it should. And the technical explanation for that is that, like I mentioned before, large diaphragm capsules create multiple polar patterns by having basically two different capsules. That's not technically accurate. It's really two different halves of one capsule, but two different diaphragms that are active. And in this microphone, in cardioid, we just disconnect and turn off the rear diaphragm. So that's called true cardioid mode. And the reason we do that is because it gives you 4 or 5 decibels higher output or higher sensitivity. And the reason for that is that the rear diaphragm adds something called capacitance to the circuit. And at that point of the circuit, additional capacitance acts like a pad, like an attenuator, okay? So by cutting off the rear diaphragm, by disconnecting it, we get, for free, 4 or 5 decibels of extra output, and also 4 or 5 decibels of signal to noise ratio, because the circuit noise would be the same either way. Okay, so by using this kind of true cardioid topology, we basically get a 4 or 5 decibel boost in signal with no additional noise. So again, in this microphone, Figure-8 and Omni are both lower output by 4 or 5 decibels. But there are also other changes, so that the sensitivity changes, as I just described, the polar pattern changes, as we've been talking about. And there's actually a frequency response change too. And this is really just a side effect of the way the two diaphragms are interacting. And so in cardioid, this microphone is fairly flat, like within a dB or 2 of a flat response across most of the spectrum. But that's not true. Across up to about 10K. Large diaphragm mics tend to roll off above 10K. So it's relatively flat up to about 10K. Now in Figure-8, there's a little bit of a bump, a presence bump around 4 or 5K. It's almost a little bit 47-ish. If you know the K47 capsule, the characteristic sound of that capsule is that 4 to 5 kilohertz presence bump. So the Delphos 2 in Figure-8 has some of that character to it. And also the bass response is a little bit elevated, because Figure-8 is the most directional of directional patterns, and as directionality increases, proximity effect increases. So if you're close to the mic and you're in Figure-8, you're going to have more bass output as well. And then Omni has, it's a little brighter on top, and it has a reduced bass output because there's a lot less proximity effect in Omni. So that's kind of a summary of all of the changes that happen when you flip that pattern switch.
Yeah, I learned something new today, which is awesome. Okay, so let's hear. I'm down. I've adjusted the input gain, so my faders are exactly the same, and I have the send to the stream pretty much where we heard that last demo of the Figure-8. The only thing I did was pull down the input gain on the Trident. Oh, and just to note, I'm on the last 8 channels, so above 25, from 25 and up. These channels are all transformerless, so there's no Lundaus in here. So it's fully discrete. We are hearing a nice, just wide open path with nothing else to colorize anything. Not that a Lundau is particularly colorized, but there isn't any on these channels. All right, Ernesto, let's play that hit song again.
So
Early, you want to go back to single?
Oh yeah. All right, go for it, Ernesto.
here I am.
Vocal mic only.
Here I am in the studio.
Acoustic only.
Here I am in the studio.
Vocal only.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's quite a different sound, actually. You can hear that there's more bleed. Like, here, do that. I'm going to mute the acoustic mic again. Ernesto, just do that one more time.
Okay. Here I am in the studio.
Okay, cool. Hold on one sec. And just for a quick reference, I'm going to roll back here to the Figure-8, and this is the vocal mic only from the Figure-8.
So much fun.
And now the cardioid.
In the studio.
It's it's quite a big difference, actually. There's a lot more body from the acoustic.
Yep.
You know, you're hearing much more full kind of one microphone sound, which could be really killer unless you want some separation. So the Cardioid is a little bit less effective in that particular arena, but still sounds good. The acoustic is... How's that sound in your headphones, Ernesto? Is it a big jump?
I guess it's just because it's probably flatter, so I hear less separation. So that bump that Matt was talking about, that 4 or 5K, I don't hear that anymore. You know, so that's pretty much what I'm hearing. So hearing everything flat, you know, everything is there.
Yeah, I hear a lot more body.
Yeah.
Especially when both mics are on, it feels a lot, you know, a little bit larger. But not necessarily. I felt like the separation from the Figure-8 was a little bit cleaner in that case.
Totally.
You know,
totally.
just from where we have the microphones. All right, we got one more. Let's hit the... I'm going to mute you, Ernesto. You
Yeah.
want to flip that to Omni? You're muted. And I'm going to set my gain back.
And while we're doing the technical stuff, I'll mention that that rumbling that you hear is nobody's stomach. That's actually Delilah snoring on the floor in the control room.
She's literally... Yeah, I just answered that question for somebody on our channel. She's literally 5 feet behind me, zonked out. It's really hard to impress her. You know, one of these days she's going to get excited when she hears something, but it hasn't happened yet.
Okay, so for those who just are joining us, we're doing a demo of various polar patterns on the Roswell Delphos 2 to illustrate how the polar pattern can really affect separation of two channels and the frequency response as well, and the amount of room sound and all those sorts of good things.
So one thing I noticed, just to go back on the gain thing, is the gain for the Figure-8 and the Omni are exactly the same. It's straight up noon on my gain input on the console. So, and then I was down. So if that's straight up noon, I had to go down about that far, which is probably on here. I don't have any numbers, but would correspond with what Matt said about how big the gain difference is. So we're back. Everything. I'm going to start with both mics on. All the settings are pretty much identical.
And this is Omni, right?
Yes, we are in Omni. So this should be quite a different sound. Ernesto?
Yep.
Back to single.
Take 3.
Single camera, Charlie?
Yep. Go for it.
Here I am, the studio.
Vocal mic only.
Here I am. Here I am. Here I am.
Acoustic mic only.
Here I am.
Vocal mic only.
Here I am. In the studio.
Well, here, I'm going to mute the acoustic mic. Give me a couple bars again, Ernesto.
Okay.
This is vocal mic only, so the top microphone.
Here I am in the studio.
Wow, it's like it's fairly even. So let me go. I'm going to solo the vocal mic again. And let's just hear the difference. So I'll go backwards. So this is what we just did with Omni.
Here I am in the studio.
Cardioid.
Here I am in the studio.
And Figure-8.
So much fun. So much fun. Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
Holy crap. That's insane hearing them back to back like that. It's almost like we did a completely different treatment on the vocals. Like EQ, you know, some compression. The Figure-8 just jumps out.
So much fun. Yeah, yeah. So much fun.
Probably because the acoustic is being mitigated.
Studio, here I am.
But that's the Cardioid, and that's pretty smooth overall.
Yeah. Here I am. Here I am.
Now keep in mind those three things I just played is only the vocal mic, not which is the top microphone, not both of them.
Oh, wow.
And Omni, that almost sounds like a pretty even balance between the two. So if you wanted to capture this with one microphone and you had a decent sounding space to do it in, Omni right in front like that is not bad. Little boomy, we'd probably move it around, but that could also be the guitar. But that is pretty good. Same thing. I muted the top mic, the vocal mic. We're just gonna listen to the mic that's on the bottom, which we're calling the acoustic mic. So I'll go backwards. Here is Omni.
Here I am. Here I am. Here I am.
Cardioid. Figure-8. My opinion, and Ernesto, I don't know what you're hearing or Matt, but if we were just doing acoustic only, I love this mic in Cardioid. One mic on an acoustic guitar. You just move it and you get that right spot that sits well with that guitar. And the Delphos 2 is one of my favorite acoustic mics in Cardioid. It's such a nice response. But I also like the Figure-8. Is with the little bit extra low end is kind of cool. Both together. I'm going to go backwards again. We're going to start at Omni.
Here I am.
Here, I'm going to make sure I'm even. Okay, so as apples I can, I have the acoustic and the vocal mic, top and bottom, even.
Here I am. Here I am. Here I am. Here I am. Here I am.
And there he is. Here is Cardioid.
Here I am having so much fun, so much fun. Yeah.
Figure-8.
Here I am having so much fun. Here I am, yeah, so much fun. Wow.
That is interesting. I love the way the two Figure-8 mics sound.
Yeah.
I mean, the separation you get, and you get some depth in there already, it sounds really nice. So if I was going two, I'm definitely going to use that. But like I said, a lot of the acoustic stuff that we record on a lot of the songs here is a single Delphos because it is one of, if not my favorite acoustic mic, just because it isn't adding a lot of extra color. So whatever the guitar sounds like is what you're capturing. And I love that about that. And it's even. Ernesto, you want to come in?
Yes.
Matt, do we have any other demo that you want him to do real quick, or can we give him a union break?
Oh, yeah. Oh, good. Yeah, thank you, Ernesto.
Sure.
And
Jesus.
someone asked what record label you're on too, so.
Yeah, so I think the use of Figure-8s like that to do isolation between the guitar and the vocal mic is a really good feature. That would, of course, at least potentially work. Depends on position if you're playing piano and singing as well. You know, the basic idea is just to point the null of the mic at whatever you don't want to hear. So.
Well, it's the same as, you know, with a cardioid, trying to get, if you're, you know, if I was doing vocals with a cardioid mic, anything that I wanted to, huh?
The camera.
Oh, sorry. We're still in P&P here. Hold on one second. Let's go back here and get rid of that. Boom. I'm going to fire the guy doing the switch. Oh, wait, that's me. If, you know, using a cardioid mic, if I wanted to mitigate bleed from the room or another instrument, I would try to get that source behind the mic. You know, you're basically using what the mic is already doing to your advantage to do a better job capturing the sound source that you're trying to capture with. But Matt's right. Every sound source would be a little bit different. Your room, what else you're capturing with it. In this case, we have two instruments that are right next to each other that we're trying to capture in a way that still allows us some control and some clarity. And that the Figure-8 with the Delphos 2 is really clear.
Yeah.
I mean, could you even hear that in the headphones?
Oh, it's amazing.
It-
Amazing.
It was really nice.
Charlie, you make a good point. In cardioid, the null, the best null is behind the mic. At least in most cases. I've seen some dynamic microphones that actually were more like a hypercardioid. They
Which
weren't
has
really
a
described
bump
that-
behind it, right?
It does, yeah. Hypercardioid I've often described as a baby Figure-8. And so on some of those mics, certainly on hypercardioid mics, but also some cardioids that are sort of secretly hypercardioid, the null is like, it's not directly behind the mic, but it's behind and then off by like 30 degrees. So it's not 180, it's like 150 or 210-ish. But it's a really good point. If you have the luxury of moving sources around or moving mics around, and you need something that's loud, not in this mic, figure out what the null of your mic is, whatever the pattern is, and point the null at that thing behind there. And then you get better isolation that way.
And also, we heard that the difference in the frequency response of the different polar patterns.
Mm-hmm.
You can use that to your advantage. Well, you might want to use Figure-8, even though you're not trying to mitigate another sound source. You might like the way that it focuses and that little extra bump on the bottom, but it's not, like Omni, you heard it just kind of spread out. It's really thick. With the Figure-8, you could still hear the bottom was kind of tight, and your pattern was tight, pointed it directly at the source. So you could use it for that as well, which I guess the fact that the mitigation on the side of that is part of why that frequency response is the way it is. But, it can be a tone shaper as well as a room or other sound source mitigator.
Yeah. So the general takeaway is learn your tools.
Yeah. And that's a really good point, especially for any of you that are doing this and recording other artists and bands. Just like when you're learning an instrument, you got to put the hours in practicing. It's the same thing with all of this and mics and any of that. You got to take the time to figure out, in this case, let's just go with the microphones. What does that mic sound like with the different polar patterns, different instruments, in combination with other microphones, and really get a good sense of that. The more you understand that, the faster you'll be able to select the right tool to get to the sound that you want to record, which makes all your production go a little bit faster and a hell of a lot more fun, because you're getting the sounds that you want right at the beginning instead of just capturing a sound and then trying to figure out how to make it into what you want later. Doesn't mean you can't manipulate it later, but if you get it more right at the beginning, it's a lot more fun to track to, right? I mean,
Yeah.
So that's my take on it anyway.
Yeah. Here's a great example of that. So for those who haven't seen it, Charlie and Ernesto just did a huge guitar cab mic shootout. How many mics did you have in that?
We did 23 mics.
Yeah. And it wasn't just 23 mics. It was like center of cone, edge of cone. You had a couple different placements.
Yep, 3 placements: center, edge, and then off axis.
So, I mean, yeah, they're making content, but at the same time, now they've spent a day listening to 23 different mics, each of which in 3 different positions on the same track on the guitar cab. That's one way to understand what tools you have.
Yep. And that honestly was the point of that. We just decided to film it for the content, but we went with a heavy guitar type sound, a distorted kind of high gainish kind of sound. And we wanted to know how each of those mics responded in the brightest spot, which is dead center of a cone, in the darkest spot out on the edge, and then what we kind of like, which is the off axis, which is kind of the best of both worlds. And just sometimes you got to reset your ears because you think you know what something is going to sound like, and then you hear it and you go, oh, I didn't expect that. And that happens. I find this happening to me as the more I do this, that I'll get stuck in doing something kind of a certain way or using a particular mic or piece of gear here, whatever, thinking that I like that and I didn't like this other thing as well, so I'm not going to use it that way. I'm just going to use this way. And then one day you go, well, you know what? I'm just going to do that way again. And then you hear it and you're like, why did I not do this sooner? Our ears change over time. The way we hear things, we hopefully are getting better at listening and getting better at finding the tones that we want faster. So it's always good to, even if you think you've done it with your gear, something like this, it's always good every once in a while to check yourself and go do it again, to make sure you're actually hearing what you think you're hearing. Because if one thing I've learned is we are really good at tricking ourselves when the sounds come out.
And after 69 bounces, right? So 69 files that we created with all these mic positions. After a while, you're like, well, maybe 50 of them are all usable, like completely. It's like depending on the tune or the sound you're after. You know, maybe one or two are like, ooh, this is too harsh. It's like, nah, we can't use that. But everything else was like, yeah. What's your favorite? I don't know. Let me go through them again.
A lot of mid-range in those. Well, it's like today with the Figure-8 on the voice.
Yeah.
The next thing we do with the vocalist, I'm actually going to pull out the Delphos and go right to Figure-8 because I like kind of the shape that happens with that. And I'm really curious to see what would happen inside the larger context of a full song with guitars and drums and everything, how that mic with that polar pattern is going to fit the vocal in there. So that is actually at the top of my list on the next vocal session is this mic in Figure-8, which I learned today in our sound check. Actually, I was kind of like, oh my Lord. Again, why have I not tried this sooner?
Charlie, did you just say you were going to audition something in the context of the mix?
Yes. I know, it's a crazy thought, right?
Crazy thought.
You mean I have to hear this microphone in context of a song to know if it works? Context is everything.
It is.
You know, it really, that's the only way to find out how something sounds is to hear it in context.
Yeah.
It is.
That's also why on this track that we did, we made it on purpose. The first couple of seconds, just the guitars by themselves. And then once the drums came in, there was a completely different way of interacting, right?
Yeah.
Because the sound by themselves, you're like, oh yeah, this sounds cool. But then drums come in, bass come in, it's like, oh, okay, now this doesn't work as I suspected.
Yeah.
And I did that not too long ago with a snare thing that I just pulled out like 6 or 7 different snares that all on their own, when you just heard drums only, you could definitely hear the differences. Once the track came in, 3 of them were really hard to tell the difference between in the context of music. So context is everything. I know it's fun to solo things up and hear how they sound, and that's fine because it gives you at least an idea of what that is capturing, you know, kind of in a vacuum. But context changes all that. So I fool myself all the freaking time.
We actually did that in the first couple of live streams, and maybe in the one with
That's
Abe
right.
Lagramas too, the ukulele player. I feel like there were cases where we would try 2 different microphones and soloed. People like in the chat would say, oh, I like the 47. And then we'd turn on the backing track and they'd say, oh, no, now I prefer the other one. Because in the context, it sat better or cut better or whatever it was.
And Anthony on those was the opposite. He really liked what he heard in the 87.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, wait till you hear your music come in. I think you're going to change your mind. And when we went to the 47, he heard that, he all went, holy crap, you're right. The vocal just kind of, for him in his particular range, it just brought him forward without having to do anything.
Yeah, because it's got a little EQ built in. That's exactly why people love that mic on so many things.
Yep. And I think at some point, Matt, I'd like to, we did some early videos on drum overheads with the Mini K series. Mm-hmm. But now with the 67, and there's another one, right?
47X, yeah.
Yes. I'd like to do that again, but have some sort of context to it.
Oh.
To hear how they sound. So it's not just here's these mics on overheads and some, me play some drums to it. That's fine. But it really, you hear how they shape the kit and what they pull out in the cymbals or what it pulls out in the snare or the depth of the toms. You really hear that more with the track, more or less, but with the track going. Yeah. So I'd love to do that with the whole Mini K series again.
Let's do it. You want to do it right now?
Do it right. Let's move all the lights over. I do have a kit out there, but.
Yeah, no, we should do that. That's awesome.
So you got anything?
No, I think this was great. Eye-opening, was so cool.
And dude, thank you. Short notice, Ernesto.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
we were having a little fun with it today. At the same time, trying to do a little, education and just show how the different pole patterns and this microphone sounds.
Yeah. And discovering a great setup, so not going making it go to waste.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I like the look we have today.
For tuning in. And again, sorry that Raine was not able to join us, but thanks for sticking it out, and hope everybody learned something. So I think we did.
I definitely did. Today has been. I got an education. I love it.
Right on.
So, all right.
Cool.
We got anything else?
Nope.
Delilah says bye, everybody. She's literally at the back of my chair snoring. So, Matt, thank you. You want to stick around for a second on the Zoom call? And we'll let everybody get back to their day.
Right on. Thanks, everybody. Cool.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. See you later.